Good to be back. So what I was going to do tonight is tell you a little bit about the Orchid Conservation Alliance and a little bit of the history, who the Orchid Conservation Alliance is, tell you about our projects, and then I'm going to explain how we raise funds and give you a little virtual tour of our Orchids in the Wild ecotours. So just to give you an impression of what it is that we actually preserve, this is a video of the Dracula Reserve made by one of our videographers. Dracula Reserve, which is on the border with Colombia and Ecuador. The center of diversity for the genus Dracula. This is part of the reserve that we have to do. So hopefully it gives you the idea of how important it is to preserve primary forests. Despite Ecuador having millions of beautiful mountains and forests and lakes and streams, much of it has been deforested. And so this little corner of Ecuador didn't have any roads in it, and we were able to go in and purchase large tracts of land and set up the Dracula Reserve. And I'm going to explain to you a little bit about how this came about. But I think the most important part of the history of the Orchid Conservation Alliance is a fellow named Lou Jost. He actually came and spoke to San Francisco, I don't know, probably 10, 15 years ago. And he's really the reason the Orchid Conservation started. And this is a little video of him that he did when he was being interviewed.
My goal was to discover new species of orchids and map where they occurred in our region, try to understand their biogeography. And so as I was doing that, I started discovering lots of new species, and a lot of them were clustered in particular places. So, and those places were outside national parks, they weren't protected. The remoteness protected them for now, but eventually the agricultural frontier would catch up. So with that in mind, I got together with friends and we formed the Ecominga Foundation to protect those special places that I had discovered. So the orchids were the start of the whole thing. But it's turned out that now that in the same places as there are new orchids, there are also new frogs and new lizards and even some new trees.
So this was his interview where he was interviewed on I think it was a British television program. He's been enormously successful in telling the world about what Foundation Ecominga does. But it really started years ago when he came to San Diego Orchid Society and he gave a talk. He'd been supported by their conservation committee who had given him a small grant. This was in 2004. And at that time, Ron and I were working on the Masdevallia book, and I wanted to learn more about pollination of Masdevallias. And I'd come across a website that Lou Jost had. It was very primitive, but he posted it. And I contacted him, and then I heard he was coming to San Diego. So I flew down to San Diego to meet him, and we all had basically a potluck over at Peter Tobias's house. And his talk was so compelling about the destruction of the forests and loss of habitat in Ecuador that we all asked him, what can we do? How could we change this? And he said, buy land. That was his cure. So all of us at that dinner put in $20, and that was the start of the Orchid Conservation Alliance. So that was 2004, 2005. It really did not become a 501c organized foundation until several years later, once we got all the paperwork in place, but that's how it started. And really the concept was to preserve habitat. Now our approach now is we work with universities and foundations to identify suitable habitat with lots of orchids that are worth conserving. Often we learn about this through field biologists who are studying the orchids of a particular region. If a new foundation or group makes a request to support a project and it looks promising, members of the board of directors will fly there, visit the site, meet the individuals, and make additional evaluations. We have to ensure that all the legal requirements, title of land, purchase price, government prices, lots of legal issues are met. And we had assessed, do we need to have guards on the site? And that turns out to be very, very important. The OCA does not own the land. The land is purchased through the foundation or through the university or the group that is doing it, and it is owned by an organization, not an individual. So the idea is that it will continue in perpetuity. And we ensure that the reserve gets conservation easements to ensure its long-term survival. And that's, turns out to be a very complicated process, but we've been quite successful in doing that. Our first project was the Rio Anzu Reserve, which is a small reserve on the eastern slope of the Andes as you approach the Amazon River Basin. And Baños is a pretty popular tourist city in Ecuador that people go for the hot springs. And that's actually where Luis lives, so he knew the area very well. And he took us to this reserve, which is along the Rio Anzu. It's a limestone canyon, and these rocks that you can see on the right here, all that green is not grass. That is Phragmipedium piercii, and it's growing there by the thousands. So the whole slope of the river canyon there is just crusted with Phragmipedium piercii, as far as you can see up this trail, and it continues on down for quite a ways afterwards. And I'm just going to zoom in here, and you can see the flowers, and there they're small, but you can see them. So that's Phragmipedium piercii. That was our first reserve. It started off very small. We've continued to expand it. And since preserving the piercii, we've discovered several new species of frogs, like we said, new toads, lizards. Turns out there's a venomous snake here we didn't know about till one of the trips we were on. But it is a beautiful spot. And it's become kind of a showcase for orchid tourism. And so when you come into the town of Baños now, there's big billboards with pictures of orchids on it. And the town is very, very proud of Luis' efforts. And all around Baños now, there are small little reserves and pockets of land that he's purchased through Ecominga. He works with the local people to get easements on certain areas. So he doesn't necessarily own all of the land. He's made tremendous efforts to expand and preserve the forest in this area. So this is the reserves that we funded to date. Total, we've sent off about $700,000. We just sent off a check actually for $75,000 this last week to expand the Dracula Reserve even further. This chart was from April 2023. And as you can see, we have reserves in Ecuador, the Rio Anzu Reserve, the Reserve of Dracula, the Phragmipedium fisherii Reserve, which is the only place where Phragmipedium fisherii is still found in the wild in Ecuador. And then we have several in Colombia. Most of them are clustered down towards the border of Ecuador, including La Palma and the Reserve of Martin. And then the Los Magnolios Reserve is a new one that's managed by the Corporation Salvamontes, and we'll talk about that in a minute, which is up towards Medellin. And Sebastian Vieira, who I also think came here and spoke once, he's our partner there that we work with. So here's a map of where the reserves are. They're indicated by the pinheads. So there's a red one up in the, let's see, I have a pointer. No one on the Zoom can see it.
You see the pointer on the.
Where is the pointer?
Right there. Your cursor.
I can't see it.
Uh,
That's why I did that. So anyway, for those of you who are in the audience, I'll just point out where it is. Let's see. Turn this on. Nothing is working.
You can do it basic.
What? There we go. So here's the Salvamontes Reserve, the Reserve of Dracula. Here's where the Rio and Zoo reserves are. There's a couple more here that Lou Jost has done through Ecominga. Then over in Brazil, there's the Reserve of Serra Bonita. And then there's another small area that we preserve or support a little bit, and that's in Rio de Janeiro state. So that gives you an idea there. South America is a vast place, and we've only got a few little reserves, but still it amounts to a lot of pretty important conservation efforts. Here's who we are. So I became the president this year when Peter stepped down. So Peter is now director. Ron Kaufman is the director and secretary. Steve Beckendorf is the director emeritus. And then Roberta recently joined us. She was membership chair, but she's also now the chief financial officer because I finally got not to be able to do that, which is great for me. And then Candy Collinger, who lives in Florida. She's our social media coordinator, and she takes care of a lot of the Facebook and Instagram posts. Our partners are the Foundation Ecominga. These are our current partners anyway. And Lou Jost, who's the founder of Ecominga, he recently stepped down as the director, and Javier Rubayo is now the current the director. Javier is an Ecuadorian who grew up hearing all about the things that Ecominga does and was so excited to join, and he's basically grown up with the organization. Lou Jost is originally from Wisconsin, but he's lived in Ecuador for many, many years. And then Fundación Salvamontes, Sebastian Vieira is the co-founder and director of that organization. He's our main contact there. He lives in Medellin, Colombia. Now, OCA funding turns out to make a huge difference. Although the first funding that Ecominga got was from us, since that initial investment, this Ecuadorian foundation has partnered with a wide variety of different partners with vastly deeper pockets, such as the World Land Trust, the Rainforest Trust, the World Wildlife Federation, Natural History Institute, families that have supported them like Molly and Vera Rao, and so forth. And so just this little bit of seed money that got the thing started has grown now into this very successful organization that has now 12 different reserves and covers about 20,000 acres. So giving it a start was really a critical part of the success. And that started in 2005 with our first funding of the reserve. So that's how much it's grown in just less than 20 years. Now, our current projects are the Dracula Reserve, which I mentioned is up in northern Ecuador, right on the border with Colombia. It's named for the genus Dracula, and it is the center of diversity. There's at least 8 or 9 species that have been found just wandering around the reserve, and there's probably more there. Actually, I just got an email from Javier the other day, and he after 5 years of walking through the reserve, he just found a new Dracula species. So they're always finding ones. And actually, there's a new species there that I think is available for naming. That's a brand new Dracula species. Most of the forests in this reserve are primary, i.e. they've never been cut, but they are threatened by agricultural expansion and sadly illegal gold mining. And I'll get into that in a minute. It's adjacent to 2 other large conservation areas, so there's a bridge of contiguous primary forest and dispersal corridors for animals and plants. And since creating this reserve, lots of new species have been discovered. Birds, reptiles, frogs, trees, bromeliads, orchids, lots of different things. And some very rare mammals have also been discovered in the reserve. So we visited it about 7 or 8 years ago. Peter asked, what's the best time to see all the orchids in bloom? And Lou said January. And I said, well, but it rains in January. But we went anyway. We were a muddy mess for a week. I'll tell you, it rained every single day, all day long. And it looked like this. But it was fantastic. We saw just amazing things. And This is just one of the views from basically the road at the edge of the reserve, looking out over the reserve. This is Peter's wife, wearing her best poncho. This is Kathy, and here's just a few of the things that we saw. Here's a Dracula that was right on the edge of the reserve, almost on the highway. And Spiro Kosmanakis, who came with us on the trip, is there with a picture. And you probably recognize Steve Beckendorf, and that little yellow thing down at the bottom there that he's photographing is actually this Dracula right here. And I'm just I don't have names in a lot of these things, but these are just some of the orchids we saw on a single trail, on a single day, walking through the reserve. So it was just, one thing after another, after another, after another. I mean, it's just incredible. And everywhere you look, there were orchids and bromeliads and weird plants and mosses and all kinds of great things. Also birds. So these are not my pictures. These are pictures from Lou Jost, who used to be a bird guide before he became an orchid nut. And he takes and paints pictures of birds all the time. And these are just some of the birds that are found in the reserve. This is a toucanet up here at the top. And this is, what's this one called? Cock of the Rock. Yeah, very famous bird that people go miles and miles and miles to see if you're a birder. And here's some of the frogs that have been on the reserve. Several of these were identified as new species. And some of the reptiles, lizards. Again, all the ones with the white backgrounds are newly described species that were found in the Dracula Reserve. And we even see mammals. So there's a puma. This is a shrew opossum, turned out to be a new species. And this is a neotropical dog. It's a dog. There's two species of dogs that are found in the neotropics. So this is, that's not the bush dog, it's the other dog. It's very similar to the bush dog. But very rare, very rarely seen. And these were captured on the cameras that they have that capture pictures when the animals walk by. And here's just a few more Ashkenanthus, bromeliads. I mean, it's just an amazing place.
No,
Is that a fuchsia? Okay, thank you. Oh, and purple tarantulas. How good is that? He was about 8 inches. He was huge. And he was walking across the road and we stopped the vehicle we were in and we all jumped out to get pictures of the hairy tarantula. But our biggest issue here is gold mining. Now, this is not the Dracula Reserve. This is what happens after the gold miners have been in and destroyed your place. And they go in illegally. They make roads, they drive through there, they dig holes everywhere. And it's a nightmare trying to keep those guys out. And they are funded by these very wealthy companies from Canada and the US and so forth. And we're just in constant battles with them. So our strategy has been to create areas around the edges of the reserve, which are also our property, so that they can't build a road into there. And we've been pretty successful at that. This is other threat. So if we don't save the forest, they get cut down in this area to put in what's called a lulu plantation. This is the fruit. And unfortunately, it's a very transient thing. The fruit's maybe 5-6 years and then nothing grows anymore, and that's the end of it. And they've cut down all that beautiful forest to make $10 worth of lulu. And this is what happens. This is one of the areas right next to our reserve that had been trashed by someone. They do this to improve the land. They cut down the forest so they could own it. And then they plant lulu. And then after 5 or 6 years, they leave a mess. So that's what's left after it's been cleared. So our approach, as I mentioned, is to prevent access. So here's the road that goes up through where the Dracula Reserve is. All these green spots here, these are parcels of land that we have purchased. And then we are now purchasing adjacent areas. Some of them are primary forest, some of them are pastures. The idea is by owning that land, we can prevent people from sneaking onto it just by being on the adjacent land. And we've purchased Lot B just recently. And we're still in discussions about Lot A, and we just sent off the deposit for part of it. And there's still more land that we're looking at purchasing. Salvamontes is a organization that's based out of Medellin. It was started by Sebastian Vieira. And this is a video that he produced.
a non-profit organization dedicated to nature conservation for the long-term benefit of all forms of life in the northwest of the tropical Andes hotspot in Colombia. Currently, we are preserving 3 fragments of forest located at El Alto de Ventanas in the municipality of Yarumal. Our goal is to connect these 3 fragments into one extraordinary biodiverse ecological corridor full of many water sources, amazing crystal clear waterfalls, spectacular cloud forests, and pristine habitats that are home to unique threatened species like the magnificent Ventanas magnolia tree, the rare Handley's slender possum, or the gorgeous ghost monkey orchid, among many other amazing rare species that make up the world-famous biodiversity of the Colombian Andes. Make a difference. Get involved and support our projects by helping with creating the Alto de Ventanas ecological corridor, through the expansion of our natural reserves, developing threatened species conservation initiatives, and building the Northern Tropical Andes Research Center that will allow us to discover more about this special, unique part of nature. Help us create a world where the life of the forest is safe and thrives. The time to act together is now. Here is how you can join us.
Okay, so Salamontes, the reserve there, they found a magnolia tree, of which now there are only 5 known trees in existence. That's that one that the guy was halfway up smiling. They've collected seeds from it and have a large reserve area where they're propagating the seedlings. It turns out that this particular magnolia, the reason why there's only 5 left, it's a very valuable timber tree. And it's been basically extirpated from all the areas all around. And they're basically reestablishing this species in the area. So they have a big project just growing these trees. They're in the process of expanding the reserve. And the research cabin got an influx of funding from the Pleurophthalid Alliance, which was a international organization, not the one that we have locally. They folded about 5 years ago when they had some money in their coffers, and they donated all of it to the Orchid Conservation Alliance. And so we've put all of that in the pot for the research cabin. It still needs more money, but they're in the process of getting all of the proper zoning and permits and so forth to build the cabin. And hopefully within a few years, there'll be a cabin there that will help facilitate researchers that come there and study the plants and so forth. The more you find new species and new things, the easier it is to expand the reserve, to get government support to gazette it as a natural reserve, conservation easements and so forth. So the research part of it is a very important element of ensuring continued survival of this reserve that you've created. Now, we raise funds for the Orchid Conservation Alliance through a number of means. You've all seen me sitting at the booth at the Orchid Show here for the Orchids in the Park and also the POE. In San Diego, Peter and a new woman that's joined us named Ashley manned the booths at the San Diego County Orchid Shows, at the Botanic Garden, the Santa Barbara shows, and now more recently the Huntington Show. And once in a while, Ron Kaufman has traveled to Florida and manned booths at the Tamiami and the Redlands show. So we have a few exposures at these different things, but it takes people and you have to go there for the whole time, and we just can't go around that much. So that's our outreach at the present. We have from time to time new species that are discovered, and we offer the opportunity to have a species named in your honor or someone who you'd like to honor. These are categorized as donations, and we just had a couple of them published, which I'll show you a slide of in a minute. There's the opportunity for transformative donations, and then Orchids in the Wild tours. Our species naming, they're average 15 to 20K per species. You pay 50% up front, and the balance from the new species is accepted for publication. And here's the one that just was published. There's 2 species in this, both named after one of our donors, Robert Pemberton, and his wife was the other one. So one of them is named Lepanthes pembertonii, and the other one is Lepanthes longier, which is his wife's last name. And there's this piece, a picture at least of one of them that was named after them. Transformative donations, from time to time we get a large donation, very often from an estate or sometimes from an organization. These go towards various things depending on how they're targeted. If they're non-targeted, sometimes they can help with some big equipment or technical support, to hire a guard, to construct the research cabin, as I mentioned, or to purchase large pieces of land. Many of these come with naming opportunities. So the Salvamontes research cabin will have a plaque on there about the Clear Phallid Alliance and its support. And then lastly, our Orchids in the Wild tours. And many of you have been on these tours. We go all over the place. These are just some random pictures of different tours that we've taken. And if you want to learn more about them, there's a page on our website. Each of these little boxes, if you click on it, takes you to a page about the tour, all kinds of pictures from the tour, the itinerary of the tour, if there was a publication or publications on it. And occasionally, if I've given a talk or someone else has given a talk and it's recorded, we'll put the recording of the talk on there as well. So if you want to travel virtually to New Guinea or to the Rio Negro or to Madagascar, there are tour talks on all of those that have been uploaded to the website. And just some shots from this year's tours. We had a small group tour that went to Sicily in April. I think they saw over 50 different species of terrestrial orchids. And here's just a few of them. Or it should be Orchis brachyphodii, not orchids. Ophrys, various ones. And now there's a lot of splitting and lumping in Mediterranean orchids, which were one before even corrects me. These were named by John Dunn, who's our orchid guide for Mediterranean orchids, and these are the names that she's using for them. But anyway, it gives you an idea of the diversity of the orchids that you could see on a nice trip to Sicily. So in addition to enjoying the food and the architecture and the wildflowers, there's lots of terrestrial orchids. We run a trip to the Rio Negro, which is a tributary of the Amazon, almost every year. It's one of our most popular trips. Basically, you're on this riverboat and you float around for about 10 days, get off twice a day and you go by boat and you float up to the orchids. So they're basically at eye level, no hiking required. The river is a black water tributary, which means it has tannins in the water. There are no mosquitoes. There are no bugs. There's more mosquitoes in my backyard than I saw on this trip. I mean, it's just amazing and it's so peaceful. No TV, no internet, no phone, nothing. Just the beautiful Amazon River, the animals, monkeys, birds, and the orchids. It's just a fabulous trip. Really highly recommend it. It's your first trip, you'll just love it. And you'll see lots of orchids. There's just a few of the ones from the trip. And Cattleya violacea tends to be very high in the trees, so very often this one's photographed actually from the riverboat rather than from the boats that are down at water level, because it's usually good 14 to 18 feet still up in the canopy. We went this year on our first native orchid trip of the US. We traveled to the Ohio Valley. Our leaders were 2 people from the Native Orchid Preservation Society, or NOPS, Jean Reinhardt and Angela Carter, thank you, Ron. And they did a fantastic job organizing visits to various reserves. We went to the very tip of northern Kentucky. We traveled all through Ohio. We went up as far as southern Michigan, and we even made a little detour into New York State. And we saw fantastic wildflowers and lots of orchids. And this trip was really a slipper orchid trip. So we saw quite a few different species of slipper orchids, including Cypripedium kentuckiense, lots of Cypripedium macaulay, and we ended at Niagara Falls, which was wonderful. And so our last day there was visiting Niagara Falls. Madagascar, the trip just ended. Ron went on that. These are a few pictures from the trip report that Johan sent me. It's led by Johan and Claire Hermans, who have written the books on the orchids of Madagascar. They know where the orchids are, they know what they are, they know where to find them and when to find them. And so this is the second trip they've done with us. And we're planning another one, but it'll be a slightly different route and a slightly different time, and probably will be in 2025. And here's the group.
Can you go back that one slide?
Yeah,
So that was first, you've been there 20 times in 33 years.
I never
First
seen
time
it.
you've never seen, first time you ever saw that species there.
Nice. Wow. Yeah, I mean, every time when I looked at the pictures, there was things there that you had seen on your trip that they were in bud when we were there, but they weren't open yet. So amazing diversity. And is that?
I've got 6 inches. 6 to 8 inches. It was like 50 feet up in the tree though.
Okay, and then this was the group, and you can see it's a small group. This includes the drivers, so we have 4 Jeeps and 4 4-wheel drives. We have Johan and Claire as the guides, and then we have a group, I think it was 10 people total. That was the OCA group that went on the trip. This year we did an exploratory trip to Papua New Guinea. This was not an official OCA trip. It was this one, Ron, the shirt with the skirt on it. We did an exploratory trip to try to figure out a new trip to Papua New Guinea because I wanted to do more exploration in the forests and mountains than we've done previously. And so we visited the highlands for 10 days, and then we did a boat trip around the islands, which are off the eastern shore of New Guinea. And this was one of the tribes that we stayed with. So these are all my buddies. They put on a fantastic show for us as we came off the boat, and they danced and welcomed us to their little village.
So they eat your toes, right?
They didn't eat our toes. This is the boat we went on. This is my daughter, Maddie. She was sure I was trying to kill her on this trip because we had so many adventures, but I think she'll come back with me on another one. And of course, when you go on a trip, lots of things happen. We got the bus stuck and it took half the village and half of us to get the bus out. I'm not pulling, I'm taking the picture.
Very helpful.
We did get the bus out. And Ron wasn't on this trip. And then it's a fantastic place for souvenirs. I have a whole basement full of them now. And one of them is these billums, which are a sort of purse or shopping bag that local people make. And they're just amazing. They only cost about $20 maximum. And it takes someone 3 or 4 months to make one of these. So just amazing selection. And everyone is so friendly and welcoming. It's just an amazing place to visit. And of course, you get to see the Dendrobium cuthbertsonii in the water. I saw so many plants, I stopped taking pictures of them. Can you imagine? I mean, they were just all over the place. It was just amazing. So next year, coming up, we've got lots of trips planned. We're going to go to the island of Rhodes, March 10th to 20th. That's led by John Dunn again. He's led orchid tours of Rhodes for about 20 years and tells me he knows where every single orchid on the island is and its name. We have a new trip planned for Nepal. We're going to fly into Kathmandu and go to areas in and around there. This is being organized by a woman who was supported by the San Diego Orchid Society conservation grant. And we're going to visit some of her conservation projects, as well as go on some overnight treks. And I'm really looking forward to it. It should be great. Judith Rapaz, who organized our trip to Switzerland a couple of years ago, she's organized one to northern Spain. This area is called the Green Spain. It's Picos de Europa, and lots of orchids, wildflowers, and butterflies. We're doing the Rio Negro trip again, end of May, beginning of June. Brand new this year, a trip to Newfoundland. Newfoundland is one of the provinces of Canada. It's a little island that's way off the east coast of Canada. And it's so different that they even have their own time zone. They're 4.5 hours later than we are here. Yes, it's off of PEI, but a long way. You can go from Nova Scotia to Newfoundland by ferry. It takes about 6 hours or something like that. Wow. But we're gonna fly in. We're gonna go into a place called Deer Lake, and then we're gonna visit Grossmore National Park. Apparently, the areas where we're going, the landscape, there's thousands of Cypripedium parviflora. So it should be great. Peter's organizing a trip to the Atlantic rainforest. That's the area near Rio de Janeiro. So you'll fly into Rio and visit a couple of reserves on the coast as well as in the highlands. And then when Ching is back, she's going to organize a trip to Yunnan. This will be October 1st to 14th. This one is a little different than the other ones we've done. We're going to go in October to see Paphiopedilums in bloom. So there should be 4 or 5 different species of wild Paphiopedilums, which are very difficult to see, but her co-worker knows where they are, and he's been really amazing about taking us to new places and showing us new things. So I'm looking forward to that. So if you're interested in the Orchid in the Wild tour, visit the website. They fill up very quickly. So if you're thinking about it, register, pay your deposit. They're refundable up to a certain date. Usually I have a pretty long wait list for many of them. So if you miss it, get on the waiting list. It's still possible someone will cancel. For example, Madagascar, I had a wait list of 7 people and all but one of them got on the trip. So a lot of people, they book way ahead and something comes up and they can't go. So you'll get your money back if someone can take your place. Where does our money come from? So this is 2022, 2023 isn't over yet, but it looks pretty similar. The majority comes from donations. And the trip profits are making a bigger piece of the pie this year than last year because we had more trips. And our expenses, almost all of them go to the reserves. The rest of it is basically the cost of running an organization, bank and finance charges, accounting, our website, and so forth. But vast majority goes to reserves. There are no salaries, everyone's a volunteer. And how can you be part of this? Become a member. You can join right on the website. You can donate right on the website. You can join us on Orchids on the Wild trip. This is the Otter on the Rio Negro. That's the boat that we spend the time on. Who got the Margaret Mee book? You got it. Anyway, well, there was one over there on the table. Oh, is this it? No.
There was prints, I don't know if it was really a book.
Is it print? There was a book. Anyway,
I have it. You have it? Yeah. You want me to get it?
no, it's okay. So the boat, the Otter, is the captain used to be the boatman for Margaret Mee.
Oh.
So we go to Margaret Mee's cabin that she would stay in when she went to paint the orchids. And he took her to see the last one she painted before she died, the Moonflower. And there are paintings, originals of hers on the boat. So it's like walking in a little bit of history. And if you haven't seen the book, or these some of the animations, her paintings are just amazing. And she traveled all through the Amazon in the 70s and 80s and almost into the 90s, had amazing adventures. Her books are full of the adventures, and I go on crazy trips. Let me tell you, she had some amazing adventures. And tragically, she died in a car accident on her way to get some award at the Kew Gardens after surviving all of these horrendous things in the Amazon. But she had paintings of orchids, millions. These are things you'll see on the Rio Negro trip, but you're going to the same areas in a much more civilized manner.
I think she had some in 96 in the conference.
Yeah, because she lived in Rio or somewhere in Brazil, or maybe in Sao Paulo, I'm not exactly sure where she lived, but she lived there for some time. Okay, so join us on the trip. And then finally, you want to help us? We desperately need more people to help us do more things. A newsletter editor would be great. Membership and communication director. Provide us with some stories and content for our social media pages. Want to go somewhere exotic? Help me organize an Orchids in the Wild tour. And then we need, it would be great to have more people on the board of directors and to help with membership recruitment. So more information, contact me at that email. And thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to take questions.